On Tuesday, the leader of Hamas said that a truce agreement with Israel was close. And also, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he hoped for good news about to come soon, and this with regards to the release of hostages. It should be noted that Israel, US and Qatar are mediating with Hamas as we speak. They have been negotiating for weeks over a hostage release that would be paired with a temporary ceasefire in Gaza. Negotiators are getting closer to an agreement with Hamas to release an initial 50 civilians, this in exchange for Israel allowing in more aid, including fuel, coinciding with a limited pause in fighting in Gaza. US's National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby has said that US is closer than they've ever been in getting these hostages released from Hamas. Also, in a press conference in Doha, Qatar's Prime Minister Al Thani has described the remaining sticking points to this emerging deal between Israel and Hamas as very minor logistical matter and said that the parties are close to reaching an agreement. Also, Israel's three-member war cabinet met with representatives of these hostages and their families on Monday evening. So indications are that hostages could be released very soon. Experts are even touting today. The army spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, said that Israeli forces have now discovered a factory that has produced weapons and unmanned aerial vehicles under a mosque in Gaza. Hagari has added that soldiers also found a tunnel shaft after searching the mosque in the Zaytun neighborhood in Gaza. Now remember, Israel has long claimed that Hamas has been using hospitals, schools, mosques and even residential neighborhoods as shields. It also claims that Hamas has hidden command centers and bunkers underneath these sprawling grounds of Al-Shifa Hospital. The IDF has also published a video to back its claims of weapons that have been stored and produced in these mosques. Now, the video claims to show soldiers discovering the weapons cache and a tunnel shaft in this mosque. Let me bring you some reactions before I quickly go over to my guest.
So today, I think you know Secretary Austin is in Kyiv to meet with Ukraine's leaders. I know this is of great interest to all of you. I just want to let you know we're still working this hour by hour. I do not have an update for you on the hostage deal that we're trying to negotiate. But as you heard the Deputy National Security Advisor say yesterday, we believe we're closer than we've ever been. So we're hopeful. But there's still work to be done, and nothing is done until it's all done. So we're going to keep working on this. We're also working to increase the flow of life-saving humanitarian assistance, food, water, medicine. We're calling for respecting the international law in terms of minimizing the loss of innocent lives. And of course, we're continuing to advocate for humanitarian pauses so that people can get out of harm's way and that aid and assistance can get in. Over the last couple of days, the 18th and the 19th of November, almost 100 trucks carrying humanitarian aid were able to enter Gaza. That brings the total to over 1,260. And then following Israel's announcement that it's allowing fuel now into Gaza to support non-governmental organizations at our strong request, we are now tracking that 6 trucks have crossed down into Gaza with approximately 18,000 gallons of fuel. That will help support food distribution and it will help generators for the hospital so that they can keep the total number of U.S. citizens that we've been able to move out of Gaza through that Rafah crossing is now up to 800. We're continuing to work that every day as well.
The soldiers from the 188th Brigade located inside a mosque, a factory that produced weapons and UAVs. I want you to understand, a mosque in the area of Zaytun has been used as a factory for the production of weapons. Soldiers entered the mosque and conducted a search, working in cooperation with soldiers from the Yahalom unit, and after the forces checked that there were no traps, they discovered a tunnel shaft. In addition to this tunnel shaft, the soldiers went further below and discovered a workshop for making rockets.
With that, let me now introduce my guest today. I'm joined in by Adam Scott Pelos, who's the CEO of Israel Innovation Fund. Many thanks to you, Adam, for joining in. Now, as far as the release of the hostages is concerned, the issue of Israelis in captivity has been a deeply emotional one, especially in Israel. We've seen what's happened to Israeli captives seized by Gaza militants, even Hezbollah, in the past as well. There's been 2006, 2008, 2014. Many of these Israeli captives have not even even made it back alive. Will US and Qatari involvement this time around ensure the safety of those held by Hamas?
I don't know how anyone can ensure the safety of the hostages held by Hamas, given the fact that the International Red Cross has been unable to visit any of these hostages. I mean, let's just be honest. Some of the hostages that are children lost their families and then were taken hostage. They will be scarred for life. There's nothing that can be done at this point until they're home to help with their rehabilitation. There are a couple of very young women, 13, 14 years old, 12 years old. I assume based on what we know of the barbarity of October 7th, I assume that no female prisoner is safe, to be completely honest. So I think trying to conject on the safety of the hostages is a little premature at this time.
All right. Adam, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu drew widespread criticism about the lack of reliable information on the hostages. He also has come under pressure from hostages' families who have accused his government of prioritizing the military campaign over the efforts to bring back their loved ones. Has Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan to destroy Hamas lacked clarity?
No, I think that there's criticism to be thrown around in many directions. Some of Netanyahu, some of the army, some of the intelligence. But I do feel that if you look at the timeline of how the international community has been trying to push for a ceasefire without the return of the hostages and the international hypocrisy of the World Health Organization,
I
Doctors
agree with
Without
you,
Borders.
Adam. I agree with you about international hypocrisy, and that's something I'm also going to deep dive into. But before we do that, let's also look closer home, because dropping pamphlets in Gaza requesting for information on those who've been held captive by Hamas, is that enough being done by the government itself? Let's place ourselves in the shoes of those families and the loved ones who have those hostages in Gaza right now, hiding underneath the tunnels. We've heard those captives come out openly on camera saying that the government doesn't care about us. At least that's what the narrative is shaping up to be.
I don't think jumping to conclusions at this time is appropriate. I think that
no, I'm not jumping to the conclusion. No, I'm not jumping to a conclusion.
Let me finish.
Let's also go by what the captives have said in the videos.
I mean, there's been different testimony. Only 4 or 5 people have been released. One was a pro-Palestinian BDS supporter. She was the first with her mother to be released. I have friends that have family that are over there. We're raising money. My organization is raising money for them. Yesterday, I was in the Knesset during the event yesterday. I was not allowed in the session, but I watched it from outside the room. It was rather funny because I was there, but I wasn't there. But listen, it's been 40 plus days. It is completely legitimate for these families to be upset. The entire Israeli people are upset. Okay, this is a huge failure on our intelligence level to have prevented this attack. I personally do not feel that you can blame one person or one branch of government for this. I think this is something that deserves widespread blame to many of the military leaders, many of the intelligence leaders, and many of the people in the cabinet.
That's why I want to know from you the intel agencies are reporting to the government, right?
Yes. Again, let's stick to the question though. It was about, is the frustration of the hostages' families legitimate? Yes. Okay. Are there things that we still do not know about this war and this military campaign and how it's being fought? Yes. Okay. This is a very difficult situation. It's urban warfare. if it were up to many people in this country, Israel never would have sent one ground troop in, and they would have carpet bombed the entire Gaza Strip. We have no idea if that could have killed all of the hostages. We know that they were taken to the hospital and then moved underground. So I don't think this is so clear cut and dry. And that's not to diminish any of the frustration of any of the families related to these hostages, all 240 of them. And especially, I mean, listen, there's a woman that gave birth a couple of days ago in captivity. So I think that there's a lot of legitimacy when it comes to the frustration. But even if it was 2 days in captivity, it's 2 days too long. And I think it's very important to understand. Getting back these hostages has been the prime priority since the beginning of this campaign, in addition to eliminating the Hamas terror group. So I cannot say yet whether or not the military campaign was run ineffectively, or there should have been this, or there should have been that, or we could have done this, or we could have done that.
Right, but I want to know from you, how is this going to now play out domestically for Prime Minister Netanyahu? Because, you know, on one hand, you have the hostage video in which the woman is seen sharply criticizing the Prime Minister, to which the government turns around and says this is cruel psychological propaganda.
Well, I mean, was this a video that was released? I'm not exactly sure which video you're referring to. There have been a couple.
Right. So I'm talking about the first video where you heard one of the women, in fact, reach out to the government, make a request that please release us, even if it takes...
Is this the one with the husband that's still in captivity?
No. No, it's one of the women.
Then I can't comment on the video, only because I haven't seen it. So I apologize for not having watched it before coming on. I didn't know that you were going to be referencing this video. Listen, these people have gone through an immense amount of trauma. I think they're allowed to say...
But we can't call it cruel psychological propaganda being used by Hamas, because, as you rightly said, there's a lot of trauma over here.
There's a significant amount of trauma, but there's also certain things that I mean, listen, the first two elderly women that were released were talking about how great the conditions were. Okay, it's the same thing that they did with Gilad Shalit. It's the same thing that they did with ISIS prisoners. There is a certain element of psychological warfare that has been going on since the beginning. October 7th was psychological warfare.
Even more reasons, all the more reasons for the Israeli government to be so cautious. That is why, right in the beginning, I asked you about 2006, about 2008.
The Israeli government and the members of the Israeli government have never been known to be cautious with the things that come out of their mouths. Let's just put it that way. We're dealing with a pretty cavalier group of political leaders. I honestly think focusing on it is kind of a waste of time, because we're going to know in 2 hours whether or not there's a war meeting. There's a war cabinet meeting at 6 p.m. tonight. There's a security cabinet meeting at 7 p.m. tonight. And then the government as a whole is going to be meeting at 8 p.m. Probably to discuss what's going on right now and the possibility of some type of exchange. I have no idea what to tell you until 8:30 p.m. tonight, when we learn what is going on. And I think this has been one of the things that has heavily impacted the way people are understanding this war, is that the patience for correct intelligence and correct reporting has not been able to, how do I say this? Correct information and correct intelligence has not been able to keep up with the need of the 24-hour news cycle. The other day, I was on Russia Today, and they were asking me, well, why hasn't information come out yet about the Shifa hospital? And I said, the raid took place less than 24 hours ago. How do you expect it to be correct information? We're not Hamas that just creates information and sends it to everybody. And apparently, people just take it as fact.
No. I'm not taking anything as fact. I've just referred to what the captives were saying in the videos. So let's not, beat around the bush about propaganda. I agree. There's propaganda. There's PR machinery being not just done by Hamas, but all those Arab nations which are favoring Hamas at the moment. And I completely go on record to agree with you over there. But right now, I would like to limit my discussion per se to the hostage situation, which is why let's now talk about the international hypocrisy, something you just mentioned. Hostage taking is also prohibited under international humanitarian law. The International Committee of the Red Cross and other aid organizations have also been denied access to the captives. This is at least what Red Cross has been maintaining. Now, Israel's foreign minister has already decried the kind of approach that has been adopted by Red Cross, the WHO, even the UN. Have heads of international agencies... Yeah, let me get to my question. Let me get to my question. Do you think that the heads of these international agencies have neglected the issue of the hostages while being more vocal and sympathetic towards Gazans and their plight, which I also understand?
150%. 150% they have. And it has been the most frustrating, demoralizing thing to see, but it is something, at least in my opinion, so expected only because of my understanding of previous conflicts that have happened in the past, given the way the international bodies address the Israel-Palestine conflict, always siding with Palestinians. We now know that the doctors in the Al-Shifa hospital knew about the hostages, which means that Doctors Without Borders knew, the World Health Organization knew, and the UN knew that not only was Hamas using this hospital as a military base, but that's where the hostages were. Okay? The International Red Cross walked into Auschwitz and said, oh, there's just some dead, burning Jews here. No big deal. Okay? I personally think that the Red Cross is an anti-Semitic institution. I met with them when I was in the army. It happened to be that when I was in the army, at that meeting, there was a terrorist hiding underneath the floorboards in Jerusalem that they were harboring. I do not believe that the International Red Cross has Jewish or Israeli lives in their best interests. And I think that they are completely compromised. I think that any information that comes out of these institutions are usually false or heavily sympathetic to one side without some type of bipartisan understanding or I'm forgetting my English right now. I apologize. But my point is that this goes back to the hypocrisy of the hostages. It goes back to the hypocrisy of the rape of these women. It goes back to every single thing that we have seen over the last month and 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks now, because think about it. How has the Red Cross maintained ties with Hamas since their inception and sovereignty of the Gaza Strip?
Right.
Okay, but now all of a sudden they can't meet with anybody. Okay, I believe the Red Cross got in to meet with the women of Boko Haram when they were taken. Okay, but they can't get into the Gaza Strip.
I sincerely hope, Adam, that all those points that you're making are also taken into consideration while these negotiations happen, especially by the United States, because, you know, just very recently, the US president has penned down an entire write-up on how he wants to work out that entire resettlement plan when it comes to West Bank. But, you know, these are some very important points that the entire international community, including the heads of these international agencies, need to, not just take into consideration, but also condemn terrorism, because in the entire rhetoric, terrorism is what needs condemnation. I'm running short of time, Adam.
I just want to say, it just seems to be that these international organizations that supposedly stand for liberalism and liberal rights and democracy and humanity clearly are pro-Islamist and are clearly pro-terror. And the fact is that there is a systemic anti-Semitism problem inside the United Nations, inside the World Health Organization, inside Doctors Without Borders, inside the International Red Cross. It's an absolute disgusting display of evil Jew hatred. Plain and simple. And that is why you are seeing Jews around the world completely disregard the statements of these institutions.
I know that Jews are bearing the brunt of terrorism, as are Indians. And as an Indian from here, I can tell you that this is a problem that has in fact plagued the entire world. But we'll have to leave it at that. Here's really crossing our fingers that these hostages are released soon, something as soon as today. Perhaps let's wait and watch how the war cabinet and how US and Qatar managed to, in fact, negotiate and weigh in on that deal. Many thanks to you, Adam Pelos, for joining in.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure to have you here on the show.